There is a moment in every media ecosystem when coverage quietly crosses a line. Not with a single headline, not with a dramatic confession, but with repetition. When skepticism becomes reflex, when commentary hardens into prosecution, when reporting stops asking questions and starts issuing verdicts. For Britain's royal press, that moment arrived some time ago. Because what we are witnessing today is not scrutiny, it is not balance, and it is not journalism in any meaningful sense. It is campaigning. For several years now, much of the British media has approached Meghan, Duchess of Sussex, and Prince Harry with open hostility. A smaller but louder faction goes further still. These figures do not merely critique the couple. They cast themselves as personal adversaries. They write as though an intimate bond has been broken, as though a private betrayal has occurred. Yet many of them admit something striking. They never met Meghan. They never had a relationship with her. They were never inside her world. They were never privy to her private life. And still they write with the certainty of insiders. That contradiction matters, because the press does not merely reflect public opinion, it shapes it. It tells millions of people how to interpret power, race, credibility and legitimacy. When commentary begins to resemble prosecution, precision becomes essential. This episode sets out to do three things. First, to explain what some of the most influential British commentators actually claim about Meghan and Harry. Second, to show how those claims are constructed, rhetorically, emotionally, and selectively. And third, to examine what is consistently left out. Not through speculation, not through fandom, but through record, pattern, and evidence. Royal reporting has always been close to power. That is not new. British journalists have long operated within a mutually beneficial arrangement, access in exchange for restraint, proximity in exchange for loyalty. But the Sussex story disrupted that arrangement. Meghan and Harry did not merely leave royal duties. They refused to accept the narratives written about them. They challenged the idea that the press alone had the authority to define their motives, their character, and their truth. That refusal was the real rupture. Because from that moment on, the tone changed. What followed was not simply disagreement, it was punishment. One of the most influential figures in shaping early narratives around Meghan was Camilla Tominey of The Telegraph. Her reporting established a framework that would echo for years. First, she rejected the idea that race played a role in Meghan's treatment, framing accusations of racial bias in the British press as exaggerated or opportunistic. Second, she reported the claim that Meghan had made Kate cry during a bridesmaid dress, fitting a story that immediately circulated as evidence of Meghan's supposed temperament and character. Years later, Meghan would challenge that version, stating that the opposite occurred. But by then, the damage was done. The story had already performed its function. It was never about a dress. It was about positioning Meghan as emotionally volatile, socially disruptive and incompatible with royal norms, while treating her account not as testimony to be examined, but as a rebuttal to be doubted. Tominey went further. In a separate column on Meghan's guest editorship of British Vogue, she suggested that the project amounted to reverse racism. That phrase matters, because it reframed an initiative celebrating diversity not as inclusion, but as exclusion. It cast Meghan's efforts as ideological rather than editorial, political rather than professional. Taken together, these interventions helped establish a climate of skepticism, a climate where Meghan's perspective was not weighed against evidence, but treated as inherently suspect. If Camilla Tominey helped lay the groundwork, Piers Morgan escalated the conflict. Morgan had previously acknowledged the monarchy's troubled history with race. He was not, by default, blind to systemic issues. But after Meghan spoke publicly about her experience, including her disclosure of suicidal thoughts, Morgan reversed course. He dismissed her account outright. He questioned her honesty. He ridiculed her vulnerability. And he framed himself as a victim of her influence after leaving Good Morning Britain. From that point on, his coverage became less about analysis and more about grievance. Morgan positioned himself as someone personally wronged not by policy, not by institutions, but by Meghan herself. This is where commentary began to blur into something else. Because Morgan was no longer merely criticising a public figure. He was centering his own emotional reaction as evidence. His disbelief became proof. His anger became justification. The result was coverage that portrayed the Sussexes as manipulative and dishonest, while casting the commentator as a casualty. That inversion is crucial. Other commentators played different roles, but followed similar patterns. Jan Moyer employed ridicule, not rebuttal, using class-based mockery to undermine Meghan's credibility. Her writing leaned heavily on tone rather than substance, signalling to readers how they were meant to feel rather than what they were meant to assess. Caroline Graham crossed another line entirely. During a family medical crisis involving Thomas Markle, she published intimate details and presented her proximity to the situation as proof of authority. Access became legitimacy. Emotion became evidence. In each case, the method differed, but the target remained the same. Meghan. And what linked these figures was not merely ideology, but behaviour. Their reporting followed a shared pattern. Meghan became the focal point. The tone hardened, and scrutiny turned openly vicious. This hostility did not exist in isolation. It was reinforced by a wider media ecosystem, dozens of outlets repeating the same narratives, often without new information, but with increasing intensity. Headlines echoed one another. Opinion pieces cited previous opinion pieces. Speculation hardened into assumed fact. Prince Harry's defiance of the press was rarely confronted directly. Instead, it was punished indirectly through harsher, more personal attacks on his wife. That imbalance matters, because this level of intensity is not applied evenly across the royal family. It remains overwhelmingly concentrated on Meghan, and by extension on the couple's refusal to submit to hostile narratives. What emerges from this pattern is a media narrative shaped less by evidence than by repetition. Claims are repeated until familiarity replaces verification. Personal grievance substitutes for analysis, and resistance to a disruptive story becomes the story itself. This is not accountability. It is enforcement. One of the most striking omissions in British coverage is the scope of Meghan and Harry's public work. Through the Archewell Foundation, their focus has been practical rather than symbolic. During periods of rising food insecurity in the United States, Archewell supported organisations delivering meals, fresh produce and direct cash assistance to families struggling with rent, groceries and childcare. Community kitchens across California, including Santa Barbara County and Los Angeles, received backing that translated into thousands of meals for seniors, school children and low-income households. After natural disasters, Archewell funded emergency relief. Following Hurricane Melissa in Jamaica, the foundation supported food distribution, clean water and aid. During Southern California wildfires, it amplified trusted local organizations, coordinating shelter, medical care and relocation. This work was not performative. It was logistical. Archewell also became a visible voice on child safety and responsible technology. The foundation supported parents whose children were harmed by social media exposure. It helped advance the Take It Down Act. It backed research into unsafe app design and emerging AI risks. It promoted phone-free school policies and highlighted international action, including Australia's under-16 social media ban as part of a broader push for platform accountability. These are policy-adjacent initiatives. Yet British commentators often dismiss them as political or self-serving. Youth and mental health remained central. Archewell supplied back-to-school essentials. It funded youth-led digital safety projects. It supported mental health initiatives addressing isolation and stigma. Prince Harry continued his work on global medical relief, backing paediatric care for children injured in conflict zones, including Gaza and Ukraine. These efforts were real. They had outcomes, yet they were minimized or ignored. When similar initiatives are undertaken by other royals, they are framed as duty. When Meghan and Harry do them, they are framed as branding. This selective treatment narrows public understanding. The monarchy benefited from Meghan's image, yet failed to challenge racially charged attacks. That silence mattered, because it allowed distortion to take hold. Perhaps the most revealing aspect of this coverage is the imagined intimacy. Certain UK journalists write as though a personal relationship once existed. The tone is proprietary, wounded, nostalgic, as if expectations were unmet. This is extraordinary, because these writers never met Meghan, and yet they write with the familiarity of former confidants. This behaviour is not mirrored with other royals. No columnist writes about meeting the perfect Kate. No one hints at personal closeness with Carol Middleton. No essays are built around imagined slights. Boundaries remain intact. With Meghan, they dissolve. This is not an even-handed examination of power. It is a response to disruption. Meghan and Harry challenged a long-standing arrangement between the monarchy and the press. In return, the press rewrote the rules. Criticism became personal. Distance disappeared. And punishment replaced scrutiny. Journalism depends on credibility, not proximity, not grievance, not volume. When reporting turns punitive, readers deserve to know why. The record is clear. The distortion did not begin with Meghan Sussex and Prince Harry. It revealed itself through her.